In this lesson, I will go over how you can solve the quadratic equations with two methods. ZPP stand for zero product property and using the quadratic formulas. So first with the zero product property, we short it with the abbreviation ZPP. You are going to have to remember anything multiply a zero will be equal to a zero. So we use this property in solving the equations. And you can see in the blue box example, we have the trinomials. We start off with factoring and we get 2 parentheses x plus 2 times x plus 5. When we factors, we get something multiply something, and that's the parenthesis x plus 2 times x plus 5 equals 0. One of these can be 0 or both of them can be 0, and that is why we are going to split and set each of these parentheses to be equal 0 and solve for x. So x plus 2 equals 0. X has to be negative 2. If you are doing the inverse, you subtract 2 to both sides, and that's how we get x equal negative 2. On the second parenthesis, x plus 5 equals 0, x will be negative 5. Or you're doing the inverse to solve for x. And we subtract 5 to both sides, and that's how we end up with negative 5. X is going to have two answers, negative 2 or negative 5. Now we say or because only one of these need to be 0, and anything multiplied 0 is equal 0. So this is why we usually use the bracket and we put the answer in for x. In the pink or the problem on the right hand side, we have x squared plus 7x equals 0. I only have two terms, and with a binomial like this, what I am going to do is I will either do the greatest common factor or I can use the dot, the differences of 2 square. I don't have the differences of 2 square here, but remember, always use the greatest common factor first in any type of factoring, including this trinomial here. You can take a quick look and see if they have any factor in common. We do that first. Greatest common factors, always factor out the GCF first. So here, both of these have x, and that's what we factor out. We factor out an x. We're left with x plus 7. So factor is something multiply something. We are going to set the x equals 0, and that's one of our answers. That's easy. X plus 7 equals 0. Another one with the answer of negative 7, because if you do the inverse operation, you subtract 7 to both sides, we will get x equal negative 7. So our answers, we usually have two answers, by the way, for quadratic equations. X is equal 0 or x equal negative 7. What if you have a greatest common factor and it's not x? It could be another letter, then it's the same. But what if it's a number? What if we have the number in common and we draw it outside? So then 5 is not going to be part of the answers, because once we put 5, we are going to put not equals 0. So that's not going to be part of the answers if we have that. Cover for the quadratic formulas, and we will go into the lesson to show you how to solve using ZPP and quadratic formulas. I want to show you the flashcard. This is what you are expected to make, so don't forget to put the flashcard in order. What I have is 0 is the hero. It's just a fun cartoon. Remind you again, when we have A times B times C, any of these A, B, or C can be 0, and it will zero out everything. So you're asked to solve factors, then you split, and then you get the answer for the variable that you're asked. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and practice with these problems on the right hand side. The left hand will be your practice problem. before I practice, I want to make sure that you are reminded of the multiplicative property of 0 again. We have a little x with the little face or head on one of the side. Oh, that's so cute. Oh, multiply 0 equals 0. Let's get on to the problem solving. Problem number 2, I have the factor form. Start off easy, right? So a plus 1 and a plus 2 inside another parenthesis. What I will do is just split the parenthesis and solve. I put the work on the left side and I split the parenthesis out and set each of them equals 0. And from here, you can actually get the answer already. You see, if we do the inverse by subtracting 1 on both sides, I will get my answer for A, which is A equal negative 1. And I will also repeat the same process on the other side. And my answer will be negative 2, right? Negative 2 plus 2 equals 0. Answer is negative 2, negative 1. And remember, we're using the bracket because if you use the parenthesis, it will look like a x and a y point coordinates, and they're not. They're the same roots, or we call them the solution. The solution for A is negative 2 or negative 1. If you plugged it in, negative 1 substituted in here, plus 1 will be 0. And no matter what value this is, this could be 7, this could be any number, and I multiply 0, I will still get 0. So this is why we have this answer, negative 2 or negative 1. Next problem. We are going to still do the same thing, and remember we are splitting the parenthesis, and I will go ahead and do the work right in here. 2m plus 3 equals 0. The second one will be 4m plus 3 equals 0. Then we solve for the letter m. Number 4 is already in the factor form. I split the parenthesis and I set it equal to 0. Then I solve by doing the inverse. So I will do it one step at a time. Remember, the inverse is the opposite. Instead of add, I subtract 3, and you remember to do it to both sides. In solving equation, we always do it to both sides. So then I will go ahead and bring down the 2m, and I'm going to be left with negative 3 on the right hand side. 0 take away 3 will be negative 3. Now I divide 2 to both sides and I am done. So m is going to be negative 3 over 2. Bracket, negative 3 over 2. The same thing is repeated on the right hand side. Let's go ahead and do the inverse of adding 3. I will subtract 3 to both sides. I will then be left with 4m. Bring it down. 0 take away 3 will be negative 3. Then I divide both sides by 4, and my answer will be negative 3 over 4. That's my second answer. Just so I can be consistent with the answers, I have moved the answer for number 2 out here, and the answer for number 4, we have already boxed it. Negative 3 over 2 or negative 3 over 4. To check your answer, you can always substitute it in, and when you get a 0, by substituting in negative 3 over 4, you multiply this 4 plus 3, you get 0. That is how you can check your answer. Just substitute it back in. Verse 6, and we are asked to solve this one. We don't have it in factor form like the previous two. What we will do then is we will have to factor this one. Check out previous lesson, factor trinomials, for all the possible method you can factor. For number 6, we have two factors and it is not in standard form How do I know that? Because this side is not equal 0. So I need to do that first. I need to get it equal 0. And I do that by just subtracting 5 to both sides. And I write the 5 under the 15 because I don't want to subtract 5 to n or 7n. They're not like terms. But as long as I do it to both sides and I get 0 on the right hand side now, this will be 10, positive 10, because 15 take away 5, we will get 10. Let's go ahead and rewrite the equation now. It's going to be n squared plus 7n plus 10 equals 0. Then we are going to go and factors with the standard form. When the equation is set to be equal 0, we can now factor. I have written the equations with the in standard form now. We have it equals 0. That's why we call it standard form. Now we can go ahead and factors, and we're going to use any method to factor trinomial. I have all positive, so I know it would be 2 times 5. When we add it, we get 7, and when we multiply, we get 10. So let's put the answer in. Plus 2 or plus 5, first, it doesn't matter. Now we can apply the ZPP, and we are going to split the parenthesis. And when I do that, I get n plus 2 equals 0, n plus 5 equals 0. I will get the n to be negative 2 or negative 5. So that's our final answers. We can go ahead and type it in. Don't forget that we are using bracket and not parentheses to write the answers for the quadratic equations. We can box our answers when we have it. Now I want you to practice, and we have only 5 problems for you to practice. This is going to be similar to what we did in number 6. Make sure to check and correct your answers. Let's show you how to factor with the quadratic equations. I love this. This is fun. Once you know how to do it, it's fun. So with the quadratic equation, what I would do is I have to get my ABC. What is the ABC? Very simple. A is the number in front of the x squared, or a variable, whatever variable, m, n, or whatever. B is the number in front of the x by itself, or to the first power. And C is the constant, no variable. So my ABC in this problem, I'm going to again do number 2 and number 4. The 3 problem on the left are going to be your practice problem. So in number 2, the first number, there's none, it's a 1, invisible 1. So my A is 1, my B is negative 5, and my C is negative 24. Notice how I get the sign with the number. Let's write it in. The work is shown to the left of the problems. I have set up with the fraction bar and the square root already. We are going to use the formulas and substitute it in. So A, B, C. We will go ahead and substitute all of it in. The negative B and negative B is now negative 5. So be careful when you have a negative. It's going to change the answer to positive, right? Because one of these negative is from the formulas, and the negative 5 is substitute in for the B. Now I also have the plus or minus in between. I'm going to have to squeeze this in. B squared, which is negative 5 squared, I can go ahead and calculate it to be 25, or we can go ahead and just, let's go ahead and write it in 25. The first step, you might consider negative 5 and then put the square on top, and until you're more used to solving the quadratic formulas. Minus the 4AC, 4 times A times C. So A is 1, my C is negative 24. If I multiply these two numbers, I get negative 24, because 1 multiply anything is itself. So negative 24, I just need to multiply it to 4, and I'm going to get my answer straight in. So consider writing that all the substitution in as a first step before we get to the next step in simplify. So 4 times 4, I get 16, hold 1. And then 4 times 2, I get 8. With 1, that would be 9. Now we work out the sign. Negative 4 times negative 24, we will get it to be positive. So be careful of the sign. Sometimes you get the wrong answer because of this sign. When you multiply a negative 4, you forget to change the sign. 2a, 2 times 1 is 2. And now all we have to do is simplify, simplify, simplify until you can no longer simplify. We get our answers. Okay, so negative times negative, I get positive 5. I will go ahead and write that in. Plus or minus is the middle. And then square root of simplify. 25 plus 96. 6 plus 5 give me 11, hold 1. 9 plus 10, and that would be 12. So 121. What is the square root of 121? 11, right? 11 times 11, 121. Now, this is where it helps if you know some perfect square and square root of commonly used number. Divide by 2. We write the next step. You can see 121, write it as 11. And I now can go ahead and split up my answers. My answer is going to have a positive and a negative. So first I'm going to write 5 plus 11 divide by 2. How much is that? Simplify. And then my second answer that I may have is with the negative. Because remember, 5 plus or negative, now we can go ahead and split it. Minus 11 and dividing by 2. So my answer, one of the answer that I have is going to be 16 divided 2, that give me 8. And then the second one will be 5 minus 11 will give me negative 6. Negative 6 divided by 2, I get negative 3. And the answer that we are going to put down here is going to be negative 3, 8. Done. We can box the answers. Ta-da! Let's go ahead and give you the chance to solve the problem. But before I do that, let's point out something. Number 4, we don't have it in standard form. And the standard form is when we have 0 on the right hand side. So what you need to do is get it in standard form, and then you're going to get your A, B, C, and then substitute and simplify. The process is going to be repeat just like the number 2. Inverse of negative 5x, I add 5x. That way I can get the 0 on the right hand side. And remember, I'm doing it to both sides. There is no like term with the x term, so I'm going to put it in the middle. And let's type it in so that it's easier to see. Post it. It said put the quadratic equation in standard form before solving or factoring. The second, number 4, we started with the inverse operation of adding 5x to both sides. That way I can go ahead and cancel out the negative 5x on the right, and I'm left with 0. I brought the 5x to the left, and there's no like terms, so what we did is we put it in standard form in order of the power on the x, and also the right hand side equals 0. So that's what we call standard form. And we put it on this little green board over here, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, before you can apply the quadratic formula to solve it. Now we are going to get the a, b, and c, and it is only accurate when you have it in standard form. We have 1 for a, positive 5 for B, and positive 5 for C. I cannot emphasize enough on how important it is to get it in standard form. Remember to have this note in. We already put in the A, B, and C, and it's only good after we get it in standard form, and that's when we have the 0 on the right hand side. We have 1 as the invisible number for A, and then 5, positive 5 for B, and then C is a constant without any variable. We have positive 5. Now substitute it into the formula, the quadratic formulas, and see if you can get the correct answers. Pause and try. Did you substitute it in? This is the step that we want you to write out and not abbreviate like I did in the problem number 2 because we didn't have enough room. So that's why I cut out this step. I substitute A, B, and C. The negative B is 5, and I substituted in plus or minus 5 for B squared minus 4 times A, which is 1, and C, which is 5. Divide by 2 times 1. 2 times 1 is 2. Now, all we have to do is simplify. Remember, simplify until we no longer can simplify. Then we get the answers. I have solved the number 4, and this is the answer that we get. We are not going to get whole number, and this is what we get. So what I did is when I simplify under the square root, I get 5 squared, which is 25, minus 4 times 1 times 5 would give me 20. 4 times 5 is 20. So 25 minus 20, I will get 5. And now the square root of 5 cannot be simplified and get a whole number. So we are going to leave that as part of our answers. And you can see negative 5 is still being brought down from the front, and plus or minus, now we split it because we can no longer simplify. I have negative 5 plus square root of 5 divided by 2 as one of my answers. Or another answer is negative 5 using the negative in the middle. Negative 5 minus square root of 5 divided by 2. And that will be the answer that we put in the box here for number 4. I'd like for you to try number 6 and see if you can work it out, and it's going to be just like number 4. Remember that you need to also do the inverse to get the right hand side to be 0. I'm not going to solve it, but I'm also going to give you the hint on number 5 over here. Some of you might be thrown off because there are 2 things on the right hand side. What you will do is still do the inverse operation. You can do it one at a time, or you can do both. Add x to both sides, that way I can cancel out the right hand side. Subtract 1, and that's the inverse of adding 1. Write that on the left hand side and we will get it all to the left. I have written it down here with the new equation in standard form. X squared plus x minus 1 equals 0. Now you can get your ABC and substitute it into the quadratic formula to solve this problem. You have 4 practice problems left. Number 1, number 3, 5, and number 6. Good luck and have fun. This is the quadratic formula song sung by Olan Rambo. I think it's very helpful when we're working on the quadratic formulas to kind of sing along with this tune. It helps us to remember and make it fun.
X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a.